Earth was, by galactic standards, a perilous enigma, a chaotic swirl of extremes that defied reason and common sense. It was the kind of planet that inspired awe and terror in equal measure, a crucible of relentless danger that forged resilience in its inhabitants. For the Galactic Union, it was a reminder of the cosmos' unyielding unpredictability. For humans, it was simply home. Despite the constant threats Earth posed, humans cherished it fiercely. The breathtaking beauty of its landscapes, the sheer variety of its ecosystems, and the indomitable spirit it cultivated in its people made it irreplaceable. It was this complex relationship that Captain Elias Trenholm had carried with him when he joined the Galactic Union, and it was why he now stood before its tribunal. Beside him, First Officer Rhea Patel, a biologist known for her cutting intellect and biting humor, radiated confidence. Elias could feel the weight of the tribunal's gaze, a blend of curiosity, skepticism, and, for some, thinly veiled fear. The lead inquisitor, Zalith, an insectoid being with a glinting exoskeleton and an air of authority, clicked its mandibles sharply. Captain Trenholm, you have been accused of gross recklessness in exposing non-human personnel to Class 13 hazards without appropriate authorization. How do you plead? Elias's grin was irrepressible. Not guilty. Rhea leaned closer and whispered, try not to poke the insect overlords too hard. Where's the fun in that? He murmured back, barely containing his amusement. The atmosphere thickened as Zalitha's mandibles clicked faster. The evidence is clear. The Galtran survey team under your command was subjected to seismic activity, apex predator attacks, and toxic flora. With respect, Rhea interjected, her tone sweet with irony, that's a pretty average day on Earth. Murmurs spread among the tribunal members. Zalith raised an appendage to restore order. You claim such hazards are commonplace? Absolutely, Elias said, settling into the cadence of a storyteller. Let me walk you through what happened. It all began with a survey mission, routine by Union standards, anything but by Earth's. The Union wanted a deeper understanding of Earth's biosphere to recalibrate its Deathworld classification. Elias, as one of the few human captains, was the obvious choice to lead. His crew included an eclectic mix of species: Jex, a meticulous Cathari navigator, Dr. Meller, a gelatinous being whose entire body quivered at the slightest environmental irregularity, and the Galtran scientists, whose confidence bordered on arrogance. When their ship, the Endeavour landed in what Elias assured them was a relatively safe area, the first problem arose. A swarm of mosquitoes descended on the Galtrans, who panicked at the incessant buzzing around their exosuits. What are these vile creatures? One Galtran shrieked, flailing. Mosquitoes, Elias replied with a shrug. They're harmless. Rhea couldn't resist adding, unless they're carrying diseases like malaria or dengue. But that's rare. Mostly. The Galtran's horror was palpable. The forest's dangers escalated quickly. Jex froze as his environmental scanner flashed. Seismic activity detected, Captain. Should we retreat? Elias frowned at his scanner. Oh, a tremor? No big deal. Probably just minor tectonic activity. Moments later, the ground heaved violently. A deafening roar erupted as a herd of colossal creatures, resembling rhinoceroses with freight train mass, stampeded through the forest. The team scrambled for cover behind boulders as the behemoths thundered past. Veltran, the most outspoken Galtran, turned to Elias, his normally pale complexion a sickly green. Minor tectonic activity? Elias raised his hands in surrender. Okay, my bad. But hey, you just witnessed Earth's megafauna. Pretty cool, right? Veltran's glare could have melted steel. As they pressed on, the hazards multiplied. A cluster of plants erupted in a toxic cloud of pollen when disturbed, forcing the team to retreat coughing and hacking. Sudden rain transformed the ground into a slippery, treacherous quagmire. Predators, a pack of hyper-intelligent wolves, stalked them until Rhea fashioned a makeshift flamethrower from a fuel canister and a torch. By nightfall, the crew was huddled around a campfire, their nerves frayed. Jex, who rarely spoke out of turn, broke the silence. How do your people survive here? Elias gazed at the stars. We adapt. Humanity has always taken what the universe throws and found a way to thrive. Rhea added with a smirk, and we're too stubborn to quit. The Galtrans exchanged uneasy glances. To them, Earth wasn't just a death world, it was an unrelenting gauntlet. But to Elias and Rhea, it was a testament to humanity's tenacity and ingenuity. Later that night, Veltrin approached Elias. "Captain, I demand an immediate return to the ship. This mission is untenable." Elias sighed. "I get it. Earth's intense. But the Union needs this data. We're the only ones who can do this. Tomorrow, we keep going." Veltrin's protest died under Rhea's steely glare. "You signed up for Deathworld research, Veltrin. If you can't handle it, maybe reconsider your career." Reluctantly, Veltrin relented. As the camp settled into uneasy quiet, Elias allowed himself a moment of pride. They had survived day one. Tomorrow would undoubtedly be worse. It always was. But that was the essence of Earth, a relentless teacher that revealed what you were truly capable of. As sleep overtook him, Elias felt a flicker of defiance. Earth might be a Class 13 death world or even Class 14, but it was home. And no tribunal would convince him otherwise. The sun rose over the forest canopy, its golden light filtering through the trees in shifting patterns that seemed almost alive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to strike. The tranquility of the morning felt like a cruel joke, an illusion shattered as the ground began to rumble with an ominous intensity. Elias was the first to bolt upright, instincts kicking in before his brain could catch up. The others were slower, groggy, and disoriented as the vibrations grew louder. A thunderous crack echoed through the air as a towering tree toppled nearby, its impact shaking the earth. Something enormous was moving through the forest, and whatever it was heading straight for them. "Everyone up. Now!" Elias barked, grabbing his gear. Jex scrambled to his feet, his scanner beeping frantically. It's massive, approximately 6 meters tall, quadrupedal, and it's closing in fast. "Perfect," Rhea muttered, already strapping on her equipment. She seized a makeshift spear she'd crafted the night before, its improvised metal tip gleaming ominously in the morning light. The Galtrans were in full panic mode. Veltrin, in particular, was wide-eyed, his trembling form a mix of panic and disbelief, like a child caught in a nightmare they couldn't wake from. "What now? Another predator? An earthquake? This planet is a waking nightmare." "Welcome to Earth," Elias said grimly, gesturing for the group to follow. "Stay close and keep quiet. If it's a predator, we do not want to draw its attention." They moved cautiously through the forest, every rustling leaf and snapping twig amplifying their dread. The rumbling grew louder, now accompanied by a guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. Elias motioned for everyone to take cover behind a cluster of moss-covered rocks as the creature emerged from the shadows. It was a nightmare-made flesh, a hulking beast, its sinewy muscles shifting beneath fur that shimmered with a strange metallic quality, almost as if it had evolved to be part predator, part machine. Razor-sharp claws glinted like forged steel, and its glowing eyes scanned the forest with an unsettling intelligence. The beast's roar shattered the silence, sending flocks of birds screeching into the sky. "What is that?" Jex whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained fear. "Something I'd rather not get acquainted with," Rhea replied, her knuckles white as she tightened her grip on the spear. For a moment, they all froze, hoping the creature would move on. But Veltrin's nerves betrayed him. A sharp, involuntary yelp escaped his lips, and the beast's head snapped toward their hiding spot. "Run!" Elias shouted, breaking cover. Chaos erupted. The creature charged after them, its immense bulk tearing through underbrush and small trees as though they were paper. Elias led the way, zigzagging through the forest and barking directions over his shoulder. The Galtrans struggled to keep up, their lab-grown physiques ill-equipped for the grueling chase. "This way," Elias called, steering them toward a narrow ravine. "If we can cross, it might slow it down." The ravine's edge loomed ahead, a precarious rope bridge swaying in the breeze. Without hesitation, Elias sprinted onto the bridge, the planks creaking under his weight. Rhea followed, her movements sure and swift. The Galtrans hesitated, their fear plain on their faces. "Move," Rhea snapped. "It's gaining on us." Veltron took a shaky step onto the bridge, his legs trembling as he advanced. The others followed, their progress painfully slow. Behind them, the beast reached the ravine's edge and let out a furious roar. It slashed at the bridge with its claws, splinters flying as the ropes strained. The team scrambled to the other side, collapsing in a heap just as the bridge gave way. The creature let out a guttural snarl, pacing the ravine's edge before retreating into the forest with a frustrated growl. "Everyone okay?" Elias asked, his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through him. There were murmurs of agreement, though Veltron looked as though he might faint. Jex's gelatinous form quivered violently, his usual composure nowhere to be found. "That was beyond unpleasant," Veltron managed, his voice shaking. "Unpleasant?" Rhea said with a breathless laugh. "That was Earth reminding us who's boss." Elias smirked but didn't comment. His mind was already racing. The creature had been unlike anything he'd encountered before, and its appearance raised unsettling questions. But there was no time to dwell. Their mission wasn't over. The journey grew more grueling as they pressed deeper into the forest. The terrain became a labyrinth of gnarled roots and treacherous vines that seemed intent on tripping them. The air hung thick with humidity, each breath feeling like a chore. The Galtrans fared the worst, their suits ill-suited for the relentless environment. "We need to rest," Veltron wheezed, his face pale. "This is unsustainable." "We rest when it's safe," Elias replied firmly. "Keep moving." Eventually, they found a small clearing where they could catch their breath. Rhea knelt to examine a set of tracks they'd come across earlier. Her brow furrowed as she studied the impressions in the dirt. "These tracks don't match any known Earth species," she said, her tone measured. "It's almost like..." "Like what?" Elias prompted. "Like it's not from here," she finished, her voice low. The implication settled over them like a heavy fog. If the creature wasn't native, it meant someone or something had deliberately introduced it to this already unforgiving world. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The last thing they needed was an extraterrestrial complication. As they rested, Jex's scanner emitted a series of rapid beeps. "Captain, I'm detecting a signal. Faint, but definitely artificial." "Location?" Elias asked, already on high alert. Jex adjusted the scanner. 2 kilometers northeast. Elias exchanged a glance with Rhea. "Could be worth checking out. If it's a distress beacon or abandoned tech, it might give us answers." The Galtrans erupted in protest, their voices a chaotic mix of fear and indignation. Elias silenced them with a raised hand. "This is what we signed up for," he said sharply. "If we want to survive, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Let's move." Reluctantly, the team followed Elias and Rhea toward the signal. The journey was grueling, the forest seemingly intent on testing their every step. But after what felt like hours, they arrived at the source. It was a small, metallic device, partially buried in the dirt. Jex knelt beside it, his gelatinous body rippling with concentration as he examined it. "Definitely alien," he said. "And not Galactic Union tech." Elias crouched next to him, his expression grim. "Can you figure out what it does?" Jex's appendages moved with precision over the device. Moments later, a holographic projection burst to life, revealing a star map etched with unrecognizable constellations and alien coordinates, their meaning a tantalizing mystery. "What is this?" Rhea asked, leaning closer. Jex studied the map, his tone tense. "It's a navigational chart. But these coordinates don't match any known systems." Elias's mind raced. If the device wasn't Union tech and the creature wasn't native, it could mean only one thing: someone else was here, and they weren't tourists. Before he could voice his thoughts, a familiar roar echoed through the trees. The creature was back, and closer than it had any right to be. "Looks like it found a way across," Rhea said grimly, gripping her spear. Elias stood, his jaw tightening. "We're out of time. Grab what you can from the device. We need to move. Now." The forest seemed to conspire against them, its undergrowth clawing at their legs and roots snagging their feet, each step a desperate struggle to move forward. The creature's guttural roars echoed through the trees, each one closer than the last. Every member of the team could feel it, a predator's patience thinning, its hunt nearing its climax. Elias sprinted ahead, every sound amplified in his ears, the rustle of leaves and pounding of his heart blending into a cacophony of survival. He glanced back just in time to see Rhea yanking Veltron forward, the scientist's legs nearly buckling under him. "Come on," she barked. "If you stop now, you're dead." "I'm trying." Veltron gasped, his face slick with sweat. Elias's earpiece crackled to life. Jex's voice, shaky but steady, came through. "Captain, the signal from the device, it's not just a chart. It's broadcasting something. A beacon." Elias swore under his breath, his mind flashing through worst-case scenarios. "What kind of beacon?" he snapped, his voice sharp with urgency. I think it's a homing signal," Jex replied. "And I think it's calling that thing to us." "Fantastic," Elias muttered, skidding to a halt and gesturing for the team to stop. "Everyone, regroup." The team gathered in a tight circle, their breaths ragged, their fear palpable. Elias looked at Rhea. "We need to disable that beacon." "You're kidding," Rhea said flatly. "We barely got out of there alive, and you want to go back?" "If we don't, that thing's going to track us wherever we go," Elias countered. "And I'm not leading it straight to the ship." Rhea let out a frustrated sigh, but she nodded. "Fine. But if we're doing this, we need a plan." Elias scanned their surroundings, his mind racing. The ravine was behind them, the creature somewhere in the forest ahead. The beacon's signal was pulling it closer, and time was running out. "Rhea, Jex, and I will head back to the device," Elias said. "Veltron, you stay here with the others and set up a perimeter. If anything gets too close, make noise, lots of it. Distract it. Buy us time." Veltron's eyes widened. "You want us to be bait?" "I want you to survive," Elias snapped. "And that means keeping it off our trail long enough for us to shut that thing down. Can you do that?" Veltron hesitated, but he nodded reluctantly. "We'll do what we can." Elias clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. Let's move." Navigating back to the device was a nerve-wracking ordeal. The forest silence hung heavy, broken by the guttural roars of the creature and the brittle snap of branches underfoot, each sound tightening the noose of fear around them. Every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind a possible threat. Elias kept his grip on his weapon tight, his eyes scanning for movement. When they finally reached the clearing where the device lay, Elias motioned for Rhea and Jex to spread out. "Find a way to disable it. Fast." Rhea crouched by the device, her fingers moving deftly over its controls. "This isn't standard tech," she muttered. "It's adaptive. Almost organic. Can you shut it down?" Elias asked, his voice tense. "Maybe. If I can figure out how it's powered," Rhea replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. Jex hovered nearby, his gelatinous form shifting nervously. "Captain, I'm detecting movement." "It's close." "How close?" Elias asked, his heart pounding. Jex pointed toward the tree line. "Close enough." Elias raised his weapon, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the forest. The creature's glowing eyes appeared first, cutting through the shadows like twin beacons. It stepped into the clearing, its massive form towering over them, its claws gleaming in the dim light. "Rhea, now would be a great time to hurry," Elias said through gritted teeth. "Working on it." Rhea snapped, her fingers flying over the device's interface. The creature let out a low growl, its muscles coiling as it prepared to pounce. Elias fired a warning shot, the plasma bolt sizzling through the air and striking the ground in front of the beast. It paused, its eyes narrowing as it sized him up. "Jex, get ready to move," Elias said, keeping his weapon trained on the creature. "Rhea." "Almost there," she said, her voice taut with focus. The creature roared and lunged forward. Elias fired again, this time hitting its shoulder. The beast snarled in pain but didn't stop. It swiped at him with a massive claw, forcing him to dive out of the way. Jex let out a terrified squeal, his gelatinous body flattening against the ground. "Got it," Rhea shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. The device emitted a piercing whine before falling silent, its lights dimming as the team exchanged stunned, breathless glances. The creature froze mid-charge, its glowing eyes flickering. It let out a confused growl, stumbling slightly before retreating into the forest. The ground trembled as its massive footsteps faded into the distance. Elias pushed himself to his feet, his breathing heavy. "Nice work," he said, looking at Rhea. She gave him a shaky smile. "Thanks. Let's never do that again." Jex reformed into his usual shape, his form still quivering. "Captain, we need to get back to the others. Quickly." Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. "Agreed. We're not sticking around to find out what's next. Let's move." When they returned to the group, they found the perimeter intact but the team visibly shaken. Veltrin approached Elias, his face pale. "Did you disable it?" "It's done," Elias replied. "The creature's gone. For now." Veltrin let out a shaky breath. "Good. Because I don't think we could have held out much longer." Elias looked at the exhausted faces of his team and felt a surge of pride. They'd survived, against all odds. But he knew their ordeal wasn't over. The beacon might have been silenced, but the questions it raised remained unanswered. "We're not out of the woods yet," Elias said. "Literally. Let's get back to the ship and figure out what the hell's going on." As the team gathered their gear and prepared to move, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. Earth might be a death world, but it was their death world. And they weren't going down without a fight. The trek back to the ship was unnervingly quiet. The forest's usual symphony of rustling leaves and distant wildlife had faded to nothing, leaving only the brittle crunch of boots on dry underbrush and the faint, acrid tang of disturbed earth in the air. The absence of sound pressed on them, a stark reminder of the moment when the creature's claws had slashed the air inches from Elias's head, of the beacon's whine seconds before Rhea silenced it. Elias led the group with determined strides, his jaw clenched as his thoughts churned. Who had activated the beacon? What was their purpose? And most importantly, what came next? The beacon, the creature, and the star map, all of it pointed to something much larger than their mission, something he couldn't afford to ignore. Behind him, Rhea kept pace, her makeshift spear slung over her shoulder. Jex and Veltrin followed, their exhaustion evident in every step, but they didn't complain. They didn't need to. The weight of survival hung over them all. As they broke through the forest's edge, the sight of the Endeavour brought a collective sigh of relief. Its metallic hull gleamed faintly under the filtered sunlight, a beacon of safety in the chaos they had endured. Elias paused, letting the team catch up before motioning them toward the ship. "Jex, run a full systems check," Elias ordered. "I want to make sure we're good to leave as soon as we're ready." Jex nodded, his gelatinous form already shifting toward the ship's entry hatch. "On it, Captain." Veltrin stopped beside Elias, his face pale but his expression resolute. "Captain, that beacon, it wasn't meant for us, was it?" Elias met his gaze. "No. It wasn't. Someone or something wanted to draw that creature here, and I'd bet my last credit it wasn't an accident." Veltrin's lips tightened, but he said nothing more. Rhea, however, wasn't one to leave questions unasked. "So what do we do now?" Rhea asked, her voice taut with frustration, her hands gripping the makeshift spear tightly. "We can't just walk away without understanding what's happening here." Elias sighed, glancing back at the forest. "We report what we've found. The Union needs to know what's happening here. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. You think they'll actually listen?" Rhea asked, her tone skeptical. "They'll have to," Elias replied. "If there's one thing the Union fears, it's losing control. And whatever's behind that beacon isn't something they can control." Jex's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Systems are green, Captain. We're ready to lift off whenever you are." Elias nodded. "Let's not waste any time. Everyone aboard." The team filed into the ship, their movements slow but purposeful. As the hatch sealed behind them, Elias took one last look at the forest. The silence seemed to stretch endlessly, but he knew it wouldn't last. Whatever forces were at play, they had only begun to reveal themselves. The Endeavour lifted off smoothly, its engines thrumming with a steady rhythm that seemed to echo their collective relief. Elias let his shoulders drop slightly, the first sign of tension easing, though his mind remained sharp. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of their next challenge. From the cockpit, Elias watched as the forest shrank beneath them, its sprawling expanse fading into the horizon. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, the tension of the past days easing just slightly. Rhea joined him in the cockpit, dropping into the co-pilot's seat. "We made it," she said, her voice tinged with both relief and disbelief. "This time," Elias replied. "But we've got more questions than answers. And something tells me we're not going to like what we find." Rhea chuckled softly. "You think we'll ever get a mission where things don't try to kill us?" "Not if we're lucky," Elias said with a grin. Their banter was interrupted by an alert on the console. Jex's voice came through again, calm but with an edge of concern. "Captain, you'll want to see this. I've decrypted part of the star map. It's pointing to a location outside Union space." Elias's grin faded. "Send it to the main screen." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a series of coordinates and an unfamiliar system. Rhea leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "That's deep space. No trade routes, no colonies. What the hell's out there?" "Guess we'll find out," Elias said, his tone serious. "But not today. First, we get back to the station, debrief, and make sure the Union knows what we're dealing with. After that, we follow the trail." Rhea nodded, her expression steeling. "Whatever's out there, we'll be ready." Elias glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Damn right we will." As the Endeavour accelerated toward orbit, the forest disappeared completely from view, leaving only the vastness of space ahead. The challenges they'd faced had pushed them to their limits, but they'd endured. Together, they'd unravel the mystery, no matter how far it took them. For now, they were alive, and that was victory enough.